There's a bipartisan effort to impose a very dangerous agenda on the United States. Many figures have been set up to try and gain your trust to manufacture consent for those policies. And it's not just happening in politics, it's happening in media as well, because they know that mainstream media has lost everyone's trust. And so they're creating what some people now are calling this mainstream alternative media that is being used to promote and market these same policies. And so, for example, you had Brett Weinstein go on Tucker Carlson and say, we need a smart wall. You've had Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who I believe had an advisory role in the last Trump administration, saying we need a smart wall. You have Trump's lawyer and senior advisor to his super PAC saying we need biometric ID for voting.
For years, the left has promoted the biometric smart wall as a better alternative to a physical one. According to those advocating for this anomaly, a physical wall is a 3rd century solution to secure our nation's southern border. They further argue that this so-called 21st century solution will be fitted with state-of-the-art facial recognition software and sensor technology that can quickly and easily determine between a jackrabbit or a human moving across the desert. It's another election season, and the smart wall issue is quickly cropping up again. But this time, it's not just people on the left who are asking us to leave the security of our country in the hands of controversial private organizations using questionable and centrally controlled surveillance and digital ID systems. In a recent discussion with Kim Iversen, popular investigative journalist Whitney Webb discusses the many dangers associated with these left and right-leaning initiatives that are always sold to Americans using different misleading languages, a tactic designed to fool and bamboozle the populace. According to Whitney, the biometric smart wall is part of a larger agenda aimed at rolling out surveillance and digital identity systems, not just in the US, but across the Western world. Whitney warns that this so-called 21st century solution has been sneakily embraced by both the Democrats and Republicans to fulfill the broader global agenda of the global elites. The system's goal is not just to control borders, but also to restrict people's movements and access, linking it with broader digital identification systems that could eventually be used to monitor and regulate various aspects of daily life, like carbon footprint or even social media behavior. It starts from the wall and slowly spreads until it covers practically every aspect of our lives, one nation under constant surveillance and complete control. Since they know Americans will not accept these diabolical systems without a fight, they will ensure that the messenger has wide acceptance across the country. It becomes very easy when you realize that all politicians are preaching the same globalist message, just in different languages. As we bring you clips from the interview, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks for the support, and enjoy the video.
And that's how they're going to sell it to the right. And they're also going to sell it sort of as a private sector initiative as opposed to a public sector initiative. But remember, all of this stuff, the digital ID agenda included, is a public-private partnership. ID 2020 and those groups, that's how they function. It's a public-private partnership. And so the public sector leaning rhetoric appeals to the left, private sector leaning rhetoric appeals to the right. And the other ways they're going to try and pitch this to the right, and they're already doing it, is not just through increased border security, but as an answer to the voter ID issue. Vote with your face. And this is already being promoted by people like Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba, and people like that on the podcast circuit. Saying, why don't we have Clear being like the company at airports alongside TSA where you can scan your eyeball, not unlike WorldCoin, and get through security faster. She was like, why not do that for voting? This is the beginning of them trying to manufacture consent to Trump's base, or rather right-leaning populists, for the same exact digital ID system that they were opposed to during COVID.
Clever.
It's very clever. And this is why I would encourage people to look at the current border situation as something that is being intentionally manufactured also by the Biden administration, because this is something where the Biden camp and the Trump camp agree. And precisely this intentional policy on the part of Biden's DHS is creating the situation whereby the solution that both parties want can be imposed, but the opposition, in this case, Trump, can write in and offer this solution, and his base will be clamoring for it. even though it's the exact same type of framework that was proposed during COVID. And of course, as you pointed out, the mandates were to force people to onboard onto this. So if you can't vote without digital ID, you can't get a job without digital ID, you have to prove you're an American citizen, right? Not a migrant. But the only way to do that now is with smart ID, just like the kind that Ron DeSantis, who was, opposed to all this COVID era stuff, he's already having that roll out in Florida, called exactly Florida Smart ID. And it's being produced by a World Economic Forum strategic partner based in France, Thales. So, regardless of their rhetoric, we need to pay attention to their actions. And both parties are leading us to this technocratic system. You just have some where it's being framed as a UN public sector effort, and then the ones where it's being framed by private sector Silicon Valley oligarchs like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, who are building the same exact kind of systems for the quote unquote deep state that Trump supporters are supposed to revile. And it's precisely a Peter Thiel funded company that's building the smart wall right now. And there's a lot to be said about that, because the amount of connections to the CIA in that regard are truly staggering. And so if Trump supporters knew that they're being tricked into supporting a CIA front company border wall as a way to stop migration, that's not just about keeping migrants out. That's also about, intimately tied up with the war on domestic terror agenda, which I think a lot of these people should know by now is directed mainly at them. And a lot of the groundwork for that war on domestic terror that's aimed largely at constitutional conservatives, but really also people that would be most likely to protest against government overreach. It says in the documentation that it's just about not just about targeting people on the right, but people on the left as well, if they get in the way of government policy. This system being built by Peter Thiel through Palantir and some of these other companies that are, military and intelligence contractors. The groundwork was set under Trump. It's been expanded under Biden. This is a two-party agenda to curb domestic dissent. And they have been building it for a very long time, obviously supercharged after 9/11. But they're essentially being, sheepdogged into a situation where they're cheering on their own prosecution.
The digital ID system was actively championed during the pandemic with the vaccine passports and met with swift resistance from certain groups. These groups argued that digital IDs could be used to limit freedom of movement. So, now Whitney believes the goal is to get these groups on board these ideas by selling them as bipartisan ideas. But this is being done so subtly and quietly that not many people realize what's happening. As a result, many people who previously opposed digital tracking during the pandemic are now in support of biometric surveillance at the border, not realizing it's the same tool sold under a different name. Then, there are concerns about the public-private partnership, another major and disturbing trademark of the global elites. Let's get back to Whitney's interview.
And there was also an effort that was being pitched to Trump by Jared Kushner and Ivanka to create this agency that Biden actually ended up creating called HARPA, the Health DARPA, an ARPA for health. But Biden called it ARPA-H. He moved the H to the N to make it look slightly different, I guess, than what was being pitched and fielded in the Trump administration. But the flagship program of that was called Safe Homes, which is an acronym for something. And essentially what that program was to have artificial intelligence comb over all of American social media posts to look for early warning signs of what they called neuropsychiatric violence as a way to stop mass shootings before they start. So if your social media post suggests that you may commit a crime in the future, you could have your guns taken away. You could have be ordered to attend like a court-ordered psychologist. You could go to preventative prison. This is a Republican administration considering this proposal. That's part of the wealth transfer in the elimination of individual freedoms, because when countries are in perpetual wartime, just look at World War I and World War II, people's freedoms and constitutional protections disappear. It happened for Japanese Americans in World War II. in World War I. It was just as extensive as that, really. I mean, they deputized regular civilians to go around and pull people out of their houses and say they were enemies of the state for being German Americans and stuff in World War I. There's a lot of forgotten history there that I think people should go back and perhaps revisit, because this is what governments, not just the United States, but including the United States, routinely do when they say, there's a national emergency and there's war. And in the Reagan administration, the same people, like Oliver North, for example, that was involved in Iran-Contra, and resurfaced in the Trump administration to propose the creation of a private CIA with Eric Prince. He was one of the point men in this idea of continuity of government, or the continuity of government protocol that was sort of came out to an extent during the Iran-Contra hearings. And what that was about is that if the government declared a national emergency under like the vaguest terms, and one of the examples of something that could trigger this was a nationwide nonviolent protest about U.S. military intervention abroad. So a massive nonviolent protest against war, they said, could trigger this. Would be, the same pre-crime paradigm, the idea of rounding up potential troublemakers before they could cause a problem and prevent the continuity of government. And so what people don't understand is that the deep state, I think a lot of people, just because of the rhetoric from independent media over the past several years, I think it's been intentionally cheapened so people don't understand what the deep state is, or what the CIA even is, and how it works. And, I think all of these very damaging entities and very problematic entities in the US government seem to be making this calculated move to the private sector to be held up sort of as saviors. They're going to collapse the public sector, the problematic parts of it. Because people know it's been found out, and trust in mainstream media has collapsed. Trust in the national security state has collapsed for a huge swath of Americans. So how do you continue with the exact same system of business as usual, but have people think that they've won? And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And I think the reason they want to do this is because when people think they have won, they are compliant. And the people they want to be the most compliant for them are the gun owners in the United States. So how do you make, the majority of gun owners in the U.S. more compliant? You make them think they won. You put someone that you've marketed to them as their guy in the White House.
There's no doubt that a symbiotic relationship exists between Silicon Valley and intelligence groups, not just in the United States, but also in foreign countries like Israel, as the Jeffrey Epstein trials have proved. Last year, J.P. Morgan Chase reached a $75 million settlement with the U.S. Virgin Islands over a lawsuit accusing the financial behemoth of facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking enterprise for 15 years. Though the bank said the settlement doesn't involve admissions of liability, it added that it regrets any association with Epstein and would never have continued doing business with him if it believed he was using the bank in any way to commit heinous crimes. We all know what to make of that explanation. This same bank and others are being fully merged with regulators and intelligence agencies in a nightmare scenario that is as dystopian as it gets. Late last year, in an eye-opening article titled "Bitcoin and the Plot to Destroy Financial Privacy," Whitney wrote, "A merging of commercial banks, their regulators, and the intelligence agencies is a complete nightmare scenario. But this is exactly what the World Economic Forum has come to promote as a model for public-private partnership. But, perhaps more critically for American citizens, this is a policy developed with the direct participation of the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, the U.S. Secret Service, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the country's most systemically important commercial banks. The establishment in this country supports these policies, and from what I can see, they have every intention of trying to make them a reality. This is the new reality for Americans and the world. The agenda has been set, and measures are ongoing as we speak to establish a new world order full of surveillance, control, and the complete subjugation of the human race. The question is, will we allow these people to dictate how we live our lives, or will we take back control and allow people to live their lives the natural way that God has ordained? What are your thoughts on the giant public-private partnership threatening to swallow us all up? Please share your thoughts on Whitney's interview and article in the comments section below. Also, ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications bell for more videos like this. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks for watching.